All right. Welcome to the live. This is kind of impromptu. As of about, I don't know, 3, 4 hours ago or something, I said to my friend Michael here and Sam, who will be joining us in a little bit, you guys want to jump on and do a live tonight? And and so here we are. Sam's going to be joining us in a little bit. But Michael, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Good. It's a great Sabbath so far. It'll get better.
So I I had the opportunity to substitute teach gospel doctrine today. I know you did as well. Oh, maybe Sam did. I
Maybe
doubt it,
Sam did. We don't know.
but that would be cool. Uh, but anyways, so this week for those tuning in after the live, um, this is July 5th. This is the day after Independence Day, and this is the Sunday in which the church has asked us to fast and pray for religious freedom. Um, and as I was looking over the lesson material and Come Follow Me for this week, um, which again, this week we were in First Kings chapters 12 and 13 and 17 through 22. Um, it felt very apropos that those would be the chapters that we're talking about this week, as we're also very much celebrating our liberties and freedoms in the United States as a country in celebration of Independence Day, and also praying and fasting for religious liberties around the world as a church. Um, because these particular chapters in First Kings are kind of a major anchor or linchpin in Israelite history. We have uh, the division of Israel into the northern and southern kingdoms. We have a lot of political intrigue. We have so many things going on. We have the introduction of, or I guess maybe reintroduction of Baal worship and Asherah worship and other things going on in the northern territory, the northern hill country. All sorts of interesting things are happening in these chapters. And so we're going to just kind of dive in and talk about Come Follow Me this week, First Kings, and just kind of share our thoughts and insights and things that we learned from our study this week. And if you are joining us in the chat, be sure to hang out with us and leave your questions and comments. We'd love to hear from you guys too. This is going to be a chill stream. We don't have like any one set topic that we're going to stick to. This is a come follow me discussion. I can and will probably pull up First Kings and we'll read through parts of it versus here and there, um, whenever we want to make a specific point or pull out something from the chapters itself. Um, but mostly we're going to have just a chill discussion about these chapters. Oh, I should also say tonight I'm wearing
That's
a design of my own make.
a beautiful
Um,
one.
this is Yahweh
Yeah.
defeating Leviathan,
Yeah.
a la Psalm 27. Um,
Carve them up.
you know, I've been messing with this design a little bit and trying to figure out if I want to actually make these shirts and I can put them up on the channel and make some sort of a shop for the channel if people are interested in that. Maybe I'll do that. But in any case, I felt this was apropos for our discussion tonight since we're going to be talking a little bit about Yahweh defeating some other gods. Um, but yeah, so um, why don't we kind of start maybe just prior to chapter 12 in First Kings, with the end of Solomon. So there's an interesting sort of um, I don't know, not parallel necessarily, but there's something interesting going on with Solomon and David. And their lives seem to be almost kind of inverse of one another. Um, David ends his life after much struggle in his later years. Um, and very faithful to Yahweh, very faithful to the covenant. Um, he really wanted to build a temple to the Lord, a house of the Lord. After conquering Jerusalem, the Lord designates that area, that spot, as the place. But because of some of David's failings, he's not the man to build the temple. That would be given to Solomon, his son, who also was uh, not necessarily the first in line to the throne to take over for David. Obviously, there's a lot of things that happened in Second Samuel and First Kings, a lot of infighting between brothers and whatnot. Solomon ends up king. Solomon is faithful to the Lord for much of his life. Doesn't seem to have a whole lot of um, failings early on in his life, or certainly as his earlier years as king. But at the end of his life, he starts, obviously for political reasons, he starts marrying a lot of women from outside of Israel. Um, he ends up with something like 1,000 wives and concubines.
I do
Um,
wonder if that's a symbolic number, but yeah, yeah, it's nuts. It's
I
ridiculous.
would I would assume so.
Yeah,
Um, I have no way of knowing for sure, but I would
right.
assume it's
Yeah.
probably symbolic. Um, Regardless, it's a lot.
Hmm.
And it's even more greater in number than David.
Hmm.
David had many wives and concubines as well. Solomon was like, I got you beat.
Yeah.
Um, but what really uh, made the Lord upset is many of these wives and concubines were from outside of Israel, outside of the covenant. And unfortunately, despite the fact that I think Solomon was thinking, I'm doing a good thing here by creating some political alliances,
Hmm.
um, the outside influence of these wives and concubines brings with them worship of their deities from their nations, their worship practices, their cultural practices. Um, and so at the end of his life, and this is the end of chapter 11 in First Kings, Solomon has basically allowed his wives to dictate the worship of other deities in Israel, something that the Lord expressly forbade time and again. And this goes all the way back to the Exodus. This goes back to the earliest layers of the Exodus and Deuteronomy, even where I am the Lord your God. I am Yahweh your God. You shall have no other gods before me. This is the Decalogue, the 10 words, the 10 commandments. This is, this is commandment numero uno, right? For all intents and purposes, this is the highest of the commandments. My covenant is with you, and you shall have no other gods before me. And so for Solomon to do this, um, really puts a strain on their covenant. And obviously, the fear is this is now leading the people to worship these other deities, and their covenant faithfulness to Yahweh will be strained or even hindered. And what would that do across generations?
Yeah.
How many generations before a people no longer serves the Lord who redeemed them? That's the big fear. I don't know any thoughts you have on the end of Solomon, his reign.
No,
Um,
I mean, that there's all of that. And then there's the aspect of how Solomon was also so incredibly wealthy, but had still placed a really strong yoke, we could call it, on the people. They didn't just build the temple. He also used conscripted labor, you could call it forced labor, to do other projects around the city, right? And so all of the 10 tribes up north were sending men down at different times. I believe it was for something like a month long each, to work on these projects, as well as obviously then Benjamin and Judah. Um, and the Levites kind of probably being left alone with that, I assume, for temple service or whatever. But like this issue of the taxation also on top of that. And it says at one point that silver was like rocks
Mhm.
to Solomon. And if anyone like the price of silver right now is kind of insane, but think about what silver would have been like back then, you know? And obviously he still had gold and he had the fine wood, all the best of the best, all the fine linens, the best of the best. And again, also all the women, the best of the best from whatever parts of the world that they knew would come from, not just from among Israel. So it's a lot. Now, um, it doesn't say it, but I assume the Lord was probably not pleased with these conscriptions or the high taxation, given what ends up happening and how obviously the prophet isn't really favoring those things, um, or the prophets, but it doesn't say it explicitly toward him, toward Solomon. It says it toward his son, who seeks to increase instead of decrease and give a little more liberty back. So there's that aspect in terms of the end of Solomon and what we're coming into and what's going to happen. Because in addition to these outside influences now, and it's not just Solomon who's marrying them; it's other people in his court who are marrying them,
Right.
um, and bringing in these outside practices, which Jezebel becomes kind of the figure, the representative figure for, um, being the outsider into Israel who like forces these religious practices that are false. Um,
Yeah, she gets kind of denoted as like she's the
yeah,
mascot for that
yeah,
theme.
yeah. Even though she's from the north, not technically in Jerusalem or whatever, but
Yeah.
that's just how it's used. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and now you just have problems on top of problems, really. There's a lot of interesting things. I don't want to try to get too far afield here, but yeah, there's a lot of the intrigue and that kind of stuff that's going on. Um, we're probably not going to talk about it today, but as people read, if you read through the end and you see what Jehu does, um, you're kind of cheering him on until you aren't, uh, and it's like rise, fall, rise, fall, rise, fall. Lord works with people with moral failings, trying to get them to really figure it out, and so often they just don't because there's so much power being like coveted, I suppose, by everybody, and just jealousy or whatever having going on. And again, if they just didn't crave power, they could have been unified and they could have been worshiping properly and they could have had God as their head.
Right. Well, and this goes back to Solomon's earlier years at the beginning of his reign, uh, when the Lord presented himself to him as like, "What do you want?" He said, "I want wisdom. I don't know what I'm doing. My father left some big shoes to fill, and I need some help." And the Lord's like, "Because you asked for wisdom instead of all these other worldly things, I'll give you wisdom, but I'll also increase your wealth and things that you can use with that wisdom to serve your people." Unfortunately, throughout the end of his life, he uses that wisdom and he uses his resources to aggrandize himself. Um, and this goes back to what you were saying about forced conscription or forced labor. Um, these people were being forced to build not just the temple, but his personal palaces and things around the city that had nothing to do with the temple or the worship of Yahweh, but were solely for his entertainment, for his aggrandizement, and so forth. Um, it was an embarrassment of riches, and he's forced the people into laboring to build things for him rather than serving them with the resources that he had.
Yeah.
Um, so this brings me to Jeroboam.
Mhm.
So Jeroboam enters the scene towards not necessarily right at the end of Solomon's life, but towards the end of his life. Um, so I don't know if you want to take this one. Maybe you could give us a little bit of who is Jeroboam, where does he come into the picture?
So Jeroboam comes from the north. He comes down when they're going to be anointing Rehoboam, right? Um, Hope I have those two straight right now. Uh,
I'll correct you in a
and
second, but yeah.
yeah, and he's saying, okay, well, um, like you gotta do this as solid here. Release us from this conscription or forced labor. Um, Reduce the taxation, and we'll be happy to follow you. Like, we're good if you can do these things for us, which seems pretty good. And it's I was thinking this earlier too, but like it's almost sad that he didn't go, oh, and by the way, can you return us back to true worship of Yahweh? Um, that didn't happen. And that might be um, part of his own issues and the condemnation that happens toward him too. But he's kind of the spokesman for his people. You had a little better background on him than me that you were telling me that I didn't fully realize, but he apparently was like the leader of much of like the projects that Solomon was building. You could, I guess, like say he's the head construction guy, or something like that. And so he was very familiar with all these things, and I figured that he'd have the influence and wherewithal to be able to go in and negotiate a deal of some sort to reduce the heavy burdens. Um, yeah, so that's him. I don't know if you want me to go beyond that, but that'll do for now, I think.
Well, yeah, I think I would even back up a little bit uh to Solomon. Solomon's the one who chose Jeroboam.
Yeah,
So when we go back to chapter 11, um Jeroboam is a young man during the end of Solomon's life. Solomon has forced conscripted this company of men for labor, uh, and he's appointed Jeroboam as his chief servant, his Eved servant, to kind of oversee the forced labor of these people. Um, and so he's described as being very industrious. He must be a fairly intelligent person. He's an industrious young man. He must have some managerial or leadership skills because Solomon sees this young man and appoints him his head servant over the forced labor. Um, so what happens is interesting. I think is um, as he's engaged in the work of this forced labor and being an overseer to these people and working for Solomon. The prophet Ahijah comes to him and he's wearing this new garment and he takes it off and he rips it up into 12 pieces and he gives 10 pieces of the garment to Jeroboam and keeps the other two pieces for himself and basically says, this is a prophecy of what's going to happen because of the evils of Solomon um, worshiping other deities, and
yeah,
marrying all these wives from foreign nations and so forth, leading the people to worship deities other than Yahweh. The tribes are going to be broken up, and 10 are going to go up to the north and become their own nation, and Judah alone, in air quotes,
yeah,
and in parentheses, with Benjamin,
yeah.
will remain in Judah in the southern kingdom. And so um, word gets around. Solomon's displeased with Jeroboam and seeks out Jeroboam to kill him. And so he flees and he goes to Egypt. And he lives in Egypt until Solomon's dead. How long that is, I don't really know. I don't think the text explicitly says how long that was, but I'm assuming it was probably a few years. Um, but in any case, it's not until Rehoboam takes the throne that Jeroboam comes back into the picture in chapter 12.
Right.
So I want to pull up chapter 12 here. I'll screen share in just a second.
Sure.
And this is the NRSV. I know a lot of people have their preferred translations. I like the NRSV. Um, so that's what I'm going to pull up. All right, let's see. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Excellent. So, this is chapter 12, and this is I want to kind of read through maybe the first little bit of this. Um, and just kind of give the context for the division of the kingdoms. So much when I talk to other members of the church, and even when we're having this lesson today in Sunday school, these are chapters that get just uh kind of pushed to the side and overlooked or just skimmed for most people. I understand the Old Testament is not everybody's jam. And some of these chapters can be a bear to get through. It's a lot of names of people and places, and you just kind of want to get to the interesting bits. Um, and a lot of people don't take the time to really read through these chapters as well. Um, and so I wanted to take a few minutes, if we can, to read through some of this here in chapter 12 to really just set the stage for what's going on that leads to the division. Um, so we have this is chapter 12, verse 1. I'll just start reading, and I don't know if you want to pick up where I leave off and we could just kind of chat.
Sure.
Um, Now Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Da, da, da. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was still in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam remained in Egypt, and they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke that he placed on us, and we will serve you. And he said to them, go away for 3 days and then come again to me. So the people went away. Um, so what's the plight of the people? He's about to take the throne, going up to Shechem. What's the plight of the people? What's their request?
Less taxes, no conscription,
Yeah,
freedom.
basically, right?
Yeah.
Mucho take it easy.
Yeah.
Um, so there's already an assumed problem here, but before he takes the throne, this isn't a problem that started with Rehoboam. This started with his father Solomon,
Yep.
and the people are simply asking, "Hey, now that you're going to take the throne, can you do us a solid and lighten the burden, lighten the taxes, lighten the conscripted service? You know, we've done this for years. I mean, decades at this point. Um, could you not lighten it up a little bit? That would be great. And I'm sure had he done that, the people would have been happy to serve him and remain a united kingdom. Um, and he takes it to consideration, though maybe not as well as we would have hoped. Um, I also want to make a note here. This is something interesting that I pointed out in class today too when we were talking about it. Why does Rehoboam go to Shechem to be anointed king? Why is that mentioned? Why is that important?
I didn't even look into it. What is important about Shechem?
So, as far as I can tell, and I could be missing something here. So Shechem is the place where Abraham first received the promise of the covenant.
Ah.
Um,
So it's like a
so
place of anointing.
yeah, I think so, and I'm sure there are other reasons. But between Shechem and Bethel and Shiloh, um, and maybe Penuel, maybe a couple other spots right around there, kind of all in the northern kingdom, the northern area.
Mhm.
Um, between those few cities or towns, you have represented all of the major places where Abraham received the covenant, Isaac and Jacob received the covenant, where they
Mhm.
offered sacrifices. All those things, those major important things to their religious and cultural history, the things that are important to their covenant with the Lord, all took place in those cities, and it started with Shechem. So, from my understanding, and I could be missing something here, but I'm taking this as this is where the father of the covenant, Abraham, received the covenant
Yeah.
and made the first promises to the Lord. So that's the place where we're going to go. And by the way, um, even in Deuteronomy and in Joshua, we have Moses and Joshua telling the people to go to Shechem and Shiloh. These are the places you're going to go to worship. We explicitly have uh, a covenant renewal ceremony happening between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, which
Hmm.
is right there where this is.
Hmm.
So even Moses and Joshua, when they're renewing the covenant for the people of Israel, getting them ready to enter Israel for the first time as a unified people before the end of Deuteronomy, he's not telling them to go to Jerusalem. Moses and Joshua are telling them to go to Shechem and Shiloh and these places here, and then to go to Mount Ebal and Gerizim
That's
and
right.
renew the covenant there.
That's right.
That's all up north by Shechem.
Yeah.
So my thought is, this place is so significant to this people that that's where you got to go to be anointed king, because as king, you are covenanting with the Lord to take upon you the responsibility of the people and the maintenance of the covenant, much like a high priest.
Hmm.
And we see a lot of kings in the Davidic line performing priestly duties as well. Um, so that was my first thought when I was reading this as well. Um, is there's a reason he's going to Shechem and not Jerusalem. And by the way, if we're doing the sort of the chronology here, we're going to do the timeline here. Um, Jerusalem being the designated spot for the house of the Lord and for priestly worship, um, and for um, all that. It's only been 40, 50 years or so since that was made a thing.
Yeah.
Near the end of David's life, after David conquers Jerusalem, the Lord's like, hey, that's the spot. I need you to buy that land. We need to get that land over near Jerusalem. That's going to be the spot where we're going to build my house. Obviously, David's not the man to do it, but your son Solomon will. That's going to be the spot. But we're only maybe 40, 50 years, just a few decades removed from the Lord, designating Jerusalem as the spot. So, for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes, the rest of Israel is still like, hey, Shechem's still the place, right? That's still the big place of the covenant. So I can imagine it must have taken a few generations before people really got it ingrained into their cultural and religious minds. Jerusalem's the place.
Yeah. Well,
Um, I
I'm going to segue you a little bit here. And hey, Sam, um,
Hey Sam.
because
Hey, everybody.
hey, I love the fact that the symbolism behind it being there. I don't know if people overlook it, but it's a threshing floor originally that David buys to be the place where the temple is. And when you think about a threshing floor and some of the symbolism around that, it's where the wheat is separated from the chaff after it's already previously been separated from the tares, right? And then it gets bundled together. And so you're gathering the harvest on a literal threshing floor. And you think of DNC 4 or some things like that, you know, about how the field is white, ready to harvest, and great will be the harvest thereof, and blah, 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 right?
Hey,
Um,
Mike, let me add a little bit of fun
yeah,
trivia on that.
yeah.
I grew up in Virginia near Washington, D.C. We just celebrated Independence Day.
Woo-hoo.
Mount Vernon, the uh, famous estate of George Washington, has a threshing floor
Yeah.
building
Heck yeah.
there. So you can see they would link up donkeys or horses or things like that, and they would thresh their wheat through there. And then there's one floor that has slats and stuff, enough that the animals could walk on it, but with enough holes in it that stuff would fall through. Then you'd go to the lower floor and sort things out. So
Yeah.
it's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, the wheat, if what happens is the chaff gets blown in the wind, right? And it supposedly is taken away, and then the wheat falls and it falls through, and you have a separation and dividing, which is one of the things God does. He creates by division so often, and what he's doing here is he's creating, or adding divine potential to, or whatever, however you want to call it, transforming the people into being his harvest, and all of that. If people don't know, wheat gets white when it's ripe, and it also bends. So it looks like it's humble. And that's the difference at the end between wheat and tares. Tares stay sticking straight up. They look like wheat until wheat is ready and it bends and is submissive to God. So just some fun things about that, but just that it's literally a threshing floor upon where the temple is built, and the symbolism of that. People could go look up more about the threshing floor symbolism. I really like it from the story of Ruth. Um, for anyone to look into that. But yeah,
Cool. So maybe I don't know if you want to read the next few verses, or if Sam, if you can see the screen, if you want to read the next few verses. We're on verse 6.
I'd have to pull up the
Okay.
arrows on the computer.
But we're talking about Rehoboam taking the throne, or being anointed king in Shechem, and then meeting with the people, right? Jeroboam has been in Egypt basically waiting for Solomon to die because Solomon tried to kill him. He gets word that Solomon's died and Rehoboam's going to take the throne. And so he comes back up out of Egypt and goes back up to Ephraim, where he's from, meets with the people, and the people basically appoint Jeroboam as like their spokesperson. Hey, go meet with Rehoboam and see if he'll lighten the burdens. And then verse 6 is where we left off. We're going to get kind of Rehoboam's gone back to his advisors, and they're going to chat for a little bit and figure out what he wants to do.
Yeah, I can read. How many verses do you want me to go?
I don't know. Maybe if we go to like verse 11.
Sure.
Go to the end of that little break there. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Something like that.
I'll try to navigate around your big head.
He'll scroll it.
Okay. So verse 6. Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the older men who had attended his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, "How do you advise me to answer this people?" They answered him, "If you will be a servant to this people today and serve them and speak good words to them when you answer them, then they will be your servants forever." But he disregarded the advice that the older men gave him and consulted with the young men who had grown up with him and now attended him. He said to them, "What do you advise that we answer this people?" Something around Jacob's forehead. You can scroll up a little.
Oh, sorry.
Scroll it. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. I grew up with him. Said to him, "Thus you should say to this people who spoke to you, your father made our yoke heavy." You scroll up just a few lines, and I'll get it done. Yeah. Your father made our yoke heavy, but you must lighten it for us. Thus you should say to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Wow, what a saying. I wasn't expecting that. Now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. My goodness.
Yeah. No, so if you guys didn't catch Jennifer Roach Lee's, she did a little thing. She's like, if you want a story to work to like get the giggles out of your teenagers, this is the story to read with them. Hold on one second.
Yeah, that's the that's the line, right? That's
Yeah,
the
that's the line right there. If you
that
explain it
line
to
goes hard.
yeah, yeah. She said some translations chose to say that my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. She's like, but no, the better translation is comparing to the member. Uh, and said, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, the whole point is, right, if you thought my father was a bad dude,
Yeah.
just get a load of me.
Yeah.
Which
Um
is, I tried to think like, he's going to Shechem, which I didn't put together, but I was like, okay, so he's trying to do all these things, and like all this just tells me he's trying to measure up. Like, if Solomon was greater than David, I have to be greater than Solomon, my
Yeah.
father, and that means I have to be boisterous. Like, I have no idea how exactly old or young he is here, but he just kind of goes with his buddies who could have been. I
Right.
mean, it says the young men who had grown up with them. These could be some guys that came from the other nations, children of wives and people that came from those other nations that we were talking about to be wives and concubines, whatever. With not just Solomon, but there would have been that happening with people in the court, and and they don't have the understanding of Yahweh. They don't have the understanding of the servant king. There's no King Benjamin example to them. Um, and they're like,
Well, what does
well,
every
I gotta be
powerful man
greater.
need? He just needs a
Huh?
chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, if you're gonna be greater, then you gotta go even harder in this way, because that's who he was. They don't, I guess, necessarily see that Solomon had ever been doing anything incorrectly for that last while in his life. It's kind of fascinating to be like, well, I have to live up, and not just live up, I have to do more and better, and that's how I do it. That's how I become great. Like, hey,
yeah, well, and he's seeing the end of his father's life and all of the forced labor and what it built, right? He's seeing the
yeah,
outcome of all that labor and the resources it provided.
yep,
Um, and I think he's probably thinking in terms of the outcomes and what's been produced from all of that labor rather than what it's doing to his people. And I take it to mean that these are advisors who he grew up with. So these are probably friends in the
mhm,
royal household, maybe brothers, cousins, um, other servants' kids that he grew up with in the royal court. And so these are more like his buddies. And they're like, hey, all this stuff we got because of your dad's labors and stuff is pretty cool. We got a lot of cool stuff here. Why don't we keep the train going and let's see if we can get even more cool stuff. Let's see if these people build us even more palaces, bring us even more wealth and resources. Um, I'm kind of thinking that maybe that's what they're going for. And I think maybe too, to your point, I think he's looking at Solomon, who elevated everything that David did, uh, and thinking, I have to be even bigger than my father. I have to do things, I have to take it to the next level, right? Um, so unfortunately, he decides he's going to ignore the advice of the councils from his father's counselors and go with his buddies, the young men. Um, I'm going to skip down here a little bit,
mhm.
and I'll read some of this. I'm going to go to 16. So he goes back to Jeroboam and the people and was like, "Yeah, I've made my decision. Uh, I'm not going to work with you guys. I'm not going to lighten up the burdens. I'm not going to release some of you from conscripted service. I'm not going to lighten the taxation. I'm not going to do any of that. In fact, I'm going to do it even harder." And all I can think of when I was teaching my lesson today was The Office, when Michael starts dating Pam's mom, and she's just giving him the business, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? I'm going to start dating her even harder.
Hmm.
And that meme came up in my brain for that. So he tells the people, yeah, you know what? Forget you guys. I like this. I like these taxes. I like this servitude. We're going to keep this going. So the people respond to Rehoboam in verse 16. They say, when all Israel saw that the king would not listen to them, the people answered the king, what share do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Basically, we're through with you. If this is going to be the dynasty of the house of David, we want no part of it. To your tents, O Israel. And this goes back to the Exodus, right? Look now to your own house, O David. Basically, like, we're done with you. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Yep.
So Israel went away to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah. When Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was the taskmaster over the forced labor, all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam then hurriedly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Basically, one last ditch effort. I'm going to send my taskmaster to force the laborers back in line. And they rebel and kill him. And he's like, oh, shoot, I guess they were serious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. We now have a divided kingdom. They haven't been united totally yet under Jeroboam. We get that in the next few verses. But we now have a break. And I want to make mention here too, because so much of the focus in these narratives and in the Hebrew Bible is on Judah and Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
Jerusalem becomes the center of worship. It's where the house of the Lord is. It's where the rightful, authorized priesthood are able to sacrifice and perform their service. All that stuff is in Jerusalem, basically from here on out. And so I think for Latter-day Saints and Christians and people living in the 21st century, we kind of always think it was that way. Jerusalem was always the place. And we tend to think of Judah and Jerusalem as maybe being bigger geographically or in population than it really was. When this happens in verse 16 through 20 or whatever it is here, Rehoboam retains Judah and Jerusalem and basically the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, right? But he loses these other 10 tribes to the north. That was like 75 to 80% of the population. Can you imagine overnight, within a few days,
Mm-hmm.
losing 75 to 80% of your entire people? That's nuts. And so from here on out, as far as the two kingdoms are concerned, really until the Assyrians come and take over the north, Judah and Jerusalem are still kind of little brother to the northern kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Despite some of its geographical size and advantages, despite the fact it has the house of the Lord, the temple, population wise, it is little brother to the northern kingdom.
Yeah.
And it remains that way until Assyria comes and wipes out the northern kingdom. But because so much of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings and all that is written from the perspective of the scribal class in Judah, the focus is on Judah and Jerusalem. And it's kind of seen mostly from that point of view. And so it can be easy to overlook the fact that in terms of population, Judah is small potatoes to the northern kingdom. And the north will have a lot of problems. There's a lot of infighting because there's so many tribes there. But also the north will have a bunch of problems in dealing with outside influences in their culture and religious observance. And I think we'll get to this a little bit more as we get further into chapter 12, and then later with like we see this explicitly in the chapters with Elijah. But that becomes a major problem for the northern country. Whereas the smaller country in the south tends to have a bit of an easier time maintaining sort of religious
Wait, Sam, can you hear
Yeah,
Jacob?
we just lost you, Jacob.
Yeah, okay. It wasn't me. Yeah, we lost you for 15 seconds.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah. You probably
You
said the
said the
best thing
most
you were going to say
important
all
thing in
night,
the whole
too.
stream. Just
Yeah, you guys missed the best thing I've ever said in my life. And I'm not gonna repeat
Not going
myself.
to repeat it. Why should you?
Despite the fact that this entire channel serves no other purpose than for me to repeat myself.
Now in
Yeah.
Hebrew.
Oh yeah, give me a break. No, I was simply saying that the Southern Kingdom, for all its faults, seems to have a bit of an easier time maintaining unified religious observance, more or less. They have their problems, but in terms of maintaining religious unity and specifically maintaining their rightful authorized worship of Yahweh, the North has a big problem that keeps coming up over and over again. But anyways, this is the splitting of the kingdoms. So we get down here, and this is, I think, where things start to pick up and get really strange and interesting with verse 25 on in chapter 12. Jeroboam is now anointed king in the north. And he starts making some decisions. So I don't know if Michael, if you want to read a bit here.
Yeah. So then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and resided there. He went out from there and built Penuel. Then Jeroboam said to himself, now the kingdom may well revert to the house of David, if this people continues to go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem. The heart of this people will turn again to their master, King Rehoboam of Judah, and they will kill me and return to King Rehoboam of Judah. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. He said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Quite an inversion. Anyway, he set one in Bethel and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one at Bethel and before the other as far as Dan. He also made houses on high places and appointed priests from among the people who were not Levites, which, well, we could talk about some of these problems. Anyway, Jeroboam appointed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival that was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. And so he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places that he had made. He went up to the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day in the 8th month, in the month that he had selected on his own. He appointed a festival for his people of Israel, and he went up to the altar to offer incense. Everything I just read there, while I do believe that the Catholic Church was already in apostasy, this is like the schism of Protestants from Catholics. I mean, yeah, that's my brain. Like, to shorten up what I have to say there, that's like their schism, because it's not like the South was perfect at this time. Now, were they doing correctly in their temple at this time? Probably, yeah. I mean, there's a lot that Solomon's wives and those people brought in with them, but we don't have anything that says, and Solomon's wives like totally ruined the temple at this point, right? It's the North where now this is what we're reading, where they're like, oh, well, we need to sever from the temple, and here's what we're going to do. And somehow what you do is you turn to the exact kind of effigy make two of them. So I guess for convenience and traveling. That is what got how many thousands slaughtered by the Levites for worshiping there at Mount Sinai. And that's the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Like, what did he do with the scripture? How did he twist it? Like there has to be some theological twisting and some doctrinal twisting that's been going on in how they're presenting it to the people, and also why he's allowed to um, have non-Levitical priests and all these other things. Just it's massive changes, fundamental changes to everything that's going on. You know, um, it's that's crazy. That's some crazy talk right there.
Well,
I'm
so here's my
interested
question.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Um, so, and I brought this up in class today when we were talking about this. Um, I agree with everything you're saying. There's got to be some rationale or justification going on behind the scenes where he's justifying to himself why he's able to do these things. Um, what do you think that is? What do you think he's thinking? How is he using either their oral tradition, their history? What do you think he's thinking to justify to himself these changes? I
Well,
have my
yeah.
thoughts, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinion.
I mean, on the political side, he's won the people over, right? Like he's not doing conscripted labor. He's not doing heavy taxation. So, and he's building up these places of importance like Shechem and Penuel, right? So that they have, and these are things you were talking about earlier that are deep memory, important places because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who's Israel, and the promises and of the covenant and all that. And so the people are one, he has the political aspect. Two, he has kind of this religious thing where he's showing the people like, look, I'm restoring what we need to restore. I'm building these places up. But it's again, it's a shift. It's complete paradigm shift off of okay, but the temple is in Jerusalem and it has those prescriptions, and you can't just reset everything. Like it's like it's again, it reminded me of the Protestants while they claimed they weren't trying to restore or that there's an apostasy or all that. The term the Great Apostasy came from the Protestants. The Mormons didn't make it up, guys. Do some history. And so they totally believed that there was an apostasy of the Catholic Church and that they were doing something to bring back the religion to what it should be. That's what I think he's doing.
And I'm just reading through this again with some fresh eyes, really. So I'd love to get some of your thoughts on how these things connect to some more broader conversations that we have, because I understand that one of the main themes we get from the Old Testament is covenant loyalty, religious, uh, like community purity, like not intermarrying out of the faith, things of that nature, like staying true to the faith, marrying within the faith. And it seems to me like there's a just this constant battle against pluralism, uh, or maybe more specifically, like what's the word for it? Accreting, like blending things together from the true faith with other things.
Like syncretism.
And so when I see syncretism, that's what I'm thinking of. Yes, that's the word. So like, yeah, the constant warning against syncretism. When I see in verse 28, he makes two calves of gold. So instantly we're thinking of the foot of Mount Sinai. He makes two, and he says, "Here are your gods." Okay, well that's against the Shema because we have gods.
He formed a god one, and now there's
exactly.
Yeah.
So he formed two gods. That's like so antithetical to what is held as the true faith. And this was meant to appease them. So
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just intrigued and struck by so many I don't know, mirror images to other things that we've been shown to be the true thing rather than what's happening now.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this section. As I've been reading more about it the last couple weeks. Um, so obviously the writer of Kings is from the South. A lot of scholars believe that the scribes who wrote and retained the stories that are compiled for Samuel and Kings are probably the same group, and they're probably from around the time of Hezekiah to Josiah, maybe closer to Josiah, because they're explicitly writing from a southern perspective, a Judahite perspective. They're also writing from the perspective of those who are a few hundred years removed from these events. They're looking back on this history. This is not immediate to them. This is their history. Mm-hmm. And also they're emphasizing and re-emphasizing time and again things from Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
To the point that they're quoting portions of Deuteronomy and Exodus. So it's likely that those who are writing Samuel and Kings are the very same scribes who probably worked during the time of Hezekiah to Josiah. The phrase that's being used here, and Sam is spot on. The phrase that's being used here when Jeroboam makes the two golden calves, or the egel, the English always says calves, which I guess is fine, but it makes me think of something weird. And the term egel, or for the two calves, egle, is ox or bull. These are two bulls, right? And the golden calf that Aaron made in Exodus 32 was an egel. It was a bull, a young bull. So hence we probably get calves. But the language used here, where he says, after presenting the people with these golden bulls, he says, here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. That is a direct quotation of Aaron from Exodus 32, verse 4.
Yeah.
And by
That's
the
what
way,
I'm saying. He's like taking it and he's totally maligning everything to reestablish a new type of restoration, right?
And because Sam brought up the fact that he's making two of them this time, it's not just the one golden calf, it's two. He says, here are your gods, plural. I had to go back and look it up for Exodus 32:4. Aaron also says gods, plural, for the singular calf. Now, I've done a bit of reading on this. I've read a few articles and gone back through some of my books and stuff from like Mark S. Smith and a few other places to try and see what some modern biblical scholars have to say about these events, and what the point of the golden calves is. And here's what I take away from all of this. Here's what I can understand from my reading. We have the political element here. We have, obviously, in verse 26, Jeroboam's realizing that despite the fact that he now controls about 75 to 80% of the population in the north, he's now king of the north, his people are still going down south to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices at the temple. And that poses a possible political problem. The triple P, right? And so he says the kingdom may well revert back to the house of Judah and the house of David with Rehoboam if the people keep going down there. If the people think they have to, they're somehow still connected to Jerusalem, which is entirely within the jurisdiction um of Rehoboam and the house of David. Remember what they said up in verse 16. What have we to do with the house of David or the descendants of Jesse? Like we're done with the house of David. Screw you guys. Well, that if the people are still going down there, they've not really fully severed themselves from the house of David. I mean, it could just, a little push over the fence and these people could go right back into unifying with the house of David. And then I lose my throne. We become a united kingdom. They'll kill me if that happens. This could potentially be my downfall. So he's thinking politically, I need to unite the people up here and like fully sever any ties with the southern kingdom and the house of David. Well, how do I do that? I need to present to them what they are used to and what they know in a way that keeps them here. Now, I asked my class earlier today this question. Jeroboam is an industrious young man. That's why he's chosen by Solomon. He must be somewhat intelligent. He is well aware of their history, I'm assuming, as a people. So when he makes these golden bowls and presents them to his people, did he just turn his brain off that day? Is he stupid? Does he not remember the debacle with Aaron and the golden calf? We all know from that history, right, that was a bad decision. That was a poor choice. And the people had to repent, and specifically Aaron had to repent. And it caused Moses a lot of frustration and stress. The people had to get over that and move forward and sort of renew their faithfulness to Yahweh after that whole incident. So does Jeroboam not know that history? Is he unfamiliar with it? Or is he just dumb and thinks, hey, I remember something about a golden calf in our history. That sounds cool. I want 2 of them. What do you guys think he's thinking there? I have my thoughts, but I want to hear you guys first.
I think he figured there was a way he could twist it to his advantage. Again, because politics is the primary driver, which is usually how, if you look at not Jeff Strong's stuff, but actual stuff from Justin Dyer, who is a real researcher with a real doctorate, and his team of other people with real research background and doctorates.
You better be very careful how you say that.
The primary driver is, well, I mean, when Jeff Strong gets his doctorate in those areas, he can be mad. But I'm not trying to speak against the guy necessarily. But the fact is, the primary driver of people leaving the church is politics, whether it's left wing or right wing. It actually doesn't almost matter because it's only a 51-49% split. It's not the massive split that everybody thinks it is. There's a lot of people that leave because of right wing stuff too. And so this is just like story as old as time. Politics will drive people away because politics, that power, what's right in front of me, my temporal needs and wants and desires, takes precedent for a lot of people. And so we're not unique in that, is what it tells me. But then, okay, well, politically, I need to create this new system. How do I do it? Here, I could sell it to them this way. He probably has people helping him along the way, preachers of certain types and whatever, people who are viewed as the spiritual leaders and the holy men and what have you, and prophets, if you will, of his own, that are helping to get this indoctrinated out there, right? Like, oh yeah, like I understand that you guys thought that Aaron was kind of under condemnation for this and that all these bad things happened, but look how it worked out. Like, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, we're able to do it now, and we're restoring something real here. Like you don't think Aaron was really that wicked, right? Like look at who he was. He was a high priest. This wasn't wrong. There's something in the history that's wrong. Let's accuse that. Stuff like that. I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but it has to be something of that sort. And it's a obviously some kind of we could call it a secret combination for power and gain, right? At least to retain, which is again, oddly enough, they split because of power and gain by somebody else. But them's the problems.
Yeah. And please remind me real quick. It was my understanding that the god El was traditionally depicted as a bull.
Yes.
And
No, an
the,
ox. An ox.
okay.
Yeah,
That,
it's the same. The
right.
term is sore, and it means bull or ox.
Oh,
In
okay. I thought
fact,
it was ox. Okay.
in and I was going to bring this up too. When you look at earlier Ugaritic literature,
Mhm.
not just the Baal cycle, but other Ugaritic literature that deals with the pantheon, and when you look at other Canaanite literature, um, there's I don't know if it's the majority, but an overwhelming number of references to El call him Tzor El or Bol El
Mhm.
explicitly. In fact, he refers to himself in narrative as Bol El when he's talking to Ashra or one of his other consorts. Uh, he will refer to himself in the third person as Bol El.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you're spot on. The iconography of the bull, for all intents and purposes, was used so commonly with El, not so much with like Baal and some other deities, but very frequently with El, almost exclusively in certain texts. And then that later gets transferred to Yahweh, and Yahweh receives some of that sort of iconography attached to him in worship later on. Um, but it's all over the place. There's dozens of references to Bol El throughout the literature. Um, and the bull
Yeah,
itself. Go ahead, Sam.
well, if you want to finish that thought, please do.
So the bull itself, as just as an icon, what purpose it serves symbolically for the people is a bull is strong, it's stable, it's virile, virility. It
Yeah.
has it's fertility. A bull oversees the pastures. Um, for all intents and purposes, this is the power of strength. This is power and strength and stability.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's the even in if you go back to earlier ancient Hebrew script, what some people call Paleo Hebrew, I know that term I think has fallen out of favor with actual scholars. Um, but if you go further back before Hebrew became a block script, with the scribal schools, um, its earlier form, they're almost like pictographs. The letters themselves were pictures of things. The Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, was shaped like a bull or an ox.
Mhm.
And that was the symbol for El, um, specifically because not only is it the letter associated with the name El for the deity, but also because it represented the bull with strength and fertility and all these other things.
In other words, he
Uh,
was the alpha. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that iconography uh, gets attached immediately to not just El worship in the north, but with Yahweh coming up the south with the Israelites. Um, and so Aaron, and this is my thoughts on it, having read a little bit on this. Um, Aaron wasn't just making some idol for the people to worship, thinking, oh, I'm going to make a totally separate representation or idol of a deity. He's thinking, we're going to worship Yahweh, and I'm going to make a animal symbolic iconographic representation of the power and strength of Yahweh in this bull, this golden calf. And so he takes it upon himself to do this. And I suspect that because the authors of Kings are putting in the mouth of Jeroboam the same exact thing that Aaron said, tied to the same act of making golden calves, my thinking is this is probably similar to what Jeroboam is thinking as well. He's not trying to make two idols of different deities or whatever for the people to worship. The people worship Yahweh. The covenant's with Yahweh. Yeah. They've just had a massive traumatic break in their kingdom. They are no longer a united people. And they've gone to the north and made for themselves a kingdom with Jeroboam. But I can imagine the people are still going down south to worship in Jerusalem because they're loyal to Yahweh.
Yeah.
And so because Yahweh and El have been historically represented symbolically with the bull or the ox, Jeroboam's thinking, I can do that here, and I can place them in two temples here in our kingdom, so the people can go worship Yahweh here in our kingdom without having to go across the border to the south and take them out of our country.
He's franchising.
The problem is he doesn't have the authority to do this.
Right. Okay.
He has zero authority this whole time. So I'm sitting there thinking, you know what he's doing? He's got these scrolls from the scribes who obviously are from Jerusalem or whatever, but he's got, let's say Genesis through Exodus scrolls, and he's like, here we go, guys. Here we go. Here's what it is.
And I think
let's tell you how to interpret it.
And I think too, because remember, we're only 40, 50 years or so from the time that David conquers Jerusalem and the Lord makes Jerusalem the place for worship. Prior to that, it was Shechem. It was Bethel. It was Peniel. It was these places in the north. Moses and Joshua explicitly say Shechem in Deuteronomy. And so I think Jeroboam saying, hey, this whole Jerusalem thing, we don't need to go down there. That's a new thing. I bet you David was making it up because he liked Jerusalem and he liked that his palace was there.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wanted to centralize power to him.
Let me just accuse.
And the house of David.
Yeah. Yeah.
But our ancestors who came here worshipped at the place of Abraham in Shechem, the place where Jacob made his home in Shechem. So we don't need to go to Jerusalem. We can stay up here in Shechem and worship where God intended. Sure. And so I don't think a whole lot of twisting has to be done here for him to make his point.
Right. Well, twisting, like he does those things first because it says he builds Penuel and Shechem, and so he's already started this restoration, right? We're going back to the roots, guys, which is the Protestant point against the Catholic point. We're going back to the scriptures, the roots, guys. You can't see me. It's on the screen. I was doing a Donald Trump thing. I don't think I sounded enough. Yeah.
So, and what I'm picking up on just this limited piece of the story that we're focusing on is exactly what you two have been saying. But I'll liken it to this. When we are reading and observing this type of fundamentalism, a primitivist impulse to take what we have and lift it up as holy tradition. You can have your rational arguments. You can appeal to cool events and traditions. And man, isn't this great that we have these sites, that we have this and that to lean on as a center, a place of gravity in our religious conscience. But I don't know the last time either you have seen Disney's Fantasia with the short where of the Wizard's Apprentice. Mickey Mouse is the Wizard's apprentice. The wizard goes away. He's a very stern, intimidating looking fellow. Mickey just can't help but do a bit of magic. He ends up animating a broomstick and he makes it do his chores for him. But given last instructions, which was to take water from a well and pour it into the tub, Mickey drifts off to sleep. And what he wakes up to is the entire place is flooded because the broom just won't stop because it's just operating off of last instructions. And so I liken that to when you turn away from living authority and the living tradition, and you take all that you have up to that point, then you're operating off last given instructions. And what you're left with is justifying the traditions and ultimately false doctrines and traditions that you create for yourself to justify you walking away from what's true in living.
This is why we have you on, Sam. That was a great analogy. I'm glad you said it that way. That I'm going to be thinking about that all week, I think. Yeah. Last instructions. I think Jeroboam's taking the last instructions before the house of David and saying, because we're cutting ourselves off from the house of David,
we're going back to
pre-David, what was going on. And it was Shechem. It was Bethel. It was Peniel. It was these places up here. And yeah, I that's an interesting analogy. I appreciate that. We got Latter-day Scooby in the chat. He says, I need to study if this holds water, but the ox being made on the northernmost and southernmost, he is mimicking the cherubim of the judgment seat to say, we are holy, we don't need the temple. That's an interesting thought. I haven't heard that before, personally. My thought is that's probably not the case. I do. So part of that, of the two golden calves or bulls being placed at either end of the northern kingdom, we have one placed in Dan and the other is in Bethel. So Dan is at the very top. And actually, why don't I, let's see. Why don't I just share a map real quick? This is just a really crude map. This is nothing particularly special. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So we have the two kingdoms, kingdom of Judah, kingdom of Israel. This section here to the left of the kingdom of Judah, that is Philistia. This is the Philistines, the sea peoples. So up towards the north here, past Samaria, all the way up here towards the top, we have Dan. And then right here where we have Beit El, that's Bethel. So on either end, both north and south ends of the northern kingdom is where these temples are erected, these high places, which are basically worship sites. They're like little mini temples, basically. That's where he places.
Isn't the phrase high places used in place of trying to call it a temple or something to indicate that it's like to another god? It's a false site or something. Because they use high places for a lot of other things, and it's always like, and I threw down their high places and their altars of worship and all that stuff.
So there are high places. Most of the high places we see thrown down, not just in the biblical texts in the northern kingdom, especially later with Hezekiah and Josiah as reforms, but also what we see archaeologically. A lot of the high places that are thrown down are in the northern kingdom. Most of them are little mini temples that are places of worship for incense and even sacrifice to other deities.
Yeah.
But some of them are for Yahweh.
Okay.
So it's not just for other deities. I
It's not a
believe we do it
phrase allocated to that use
right.
only.
It the term high place, bama or high places, bamot, just refers to the actual structure itself. Is these
Mhm,
structures were typically built like on the side of roads or up on a hill,
mhm,
and were built on a platform that stood above the walking path or whatever. So they were a high place.
right.
Um, and they were just these little mini sanctuaries or temples that you could worship and burn incense or maybe offer sacrifices or prayer and stuff. Um, and they would usually have, like what we see with Jeroboam, he institutes non-Levite or non-Levitical priests to serve at these
Mhm,
high places and these worship centers. Most of these high places historically had some priests that attended to that specific site, and that was just their duty, their job.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's all I wanted to share with the map for now. We might pull it back up later, but um, yeah, we have some interesting things going on here. So we have Jeroboam erects the different high places and the temples and stuff around. He builds up Shechem as the place. Um, he builds the golden calves. He sets up non-Levitical priests for these worship centers. Um, and most of it, I think, really comes down to maintaining political control and unity of the northern kingdoms, the northern tribes in the kingdom. Um, I don't know how much of that is because he actually cares about maintaining religious purity. Maybe that's in mind. Maybe he actually does care about maintaining some Yahwistic uh, worship purity in the Northern Kingdom that is simply just broken off from the Southern Kingdom.
Right.
That could certainly be true, but I think the primary motivator is political.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, um, oh, the other thing too, he makes this festival, right? The 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival that was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did in Bethel, sacrifices to the calves that he'd made, and he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places that he made, so forth and so on. Um, this comes exactly 1 month after the the festival that's mentioned in Judah, which occurs on the 15th day of the 7th month in Judah, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, Feast of Booths. So he says, my people are going down there, worshiping at the temple in Jerusalem, offering their sacrifices there. I need to cut them off from that and keep them up here. We're going to set up our own temples to worship Yahweh, our own iconography. We're going to set up our own priest cult, our own priesthood up here. Um, and by the way, you don't need to go to the south to worship and celebrate the Sukkot, the tabernacle or the Feast of Tabernacles. We can do our own version up here.
Right.
I don't think he actually made a totally new festival. I think he just ripped off Sukkot and just did it 1 month later in the north and said, we'll just do our own version of it up here.
Kind of out of spite. Like we can't do it the same day. Then we wouldn't be, maybe the scriptures they had or whatever said it has to be the 15th day of the month. And he's like,
Yeah.
but it's really this month. you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That is
it
one
could
thing
be.
though, is how it specifically says he appointed priests that were not Levites. And that
Yep.
just immediately made me think about Church of England, and let's say more recently, the Society of St. Pius the Tenth. Is that what it is?
Yep.
SSPX?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So yeah, just you know, well, not in the case of SSPX, but particularly in the case of the Church of England, where the political sovereign starts appointing religious offices. Like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing that he could do,
Well,
because it's not.
the thing that the Catholics have, just to segue slightly, we'll come right back, but the thing the Catholics have working against them is they say the priest leaves an indelible mark and cannot be removed. So all these people that they're excommunicating are still priests. forever in the eyes of God, because there's an indelible mark. It's like carved into the bones of their body or something, you know. That's another supernatural thing for the people that have seen that show. Um, but it's fascinating how, yes, they're in schism, they got excommunicated, but they still have authority. Um, in terms of they appointed bishops, which they're not allowed to do, and that's what caused it, right? But all those people are still priests. They all still have priesthood. Irregardless of what the Pope does, he can't revoke that. Seems kind of silly because at Sinai, God revoked it and limited it. And then he said, forevermore, with this line, there's this certain authority and it's a bloodline. And it's the only priesthood bloodline there is. It doesn't mean others can't have the priesthood outside that bloodline, because we're going to talk about Elijah in a minute. He's not part of that bloodline. He clearly has the priesthood. David wasn't part of that bloodline. He was clearly part of the priesthood, and the other kings. I mean, we were just talking about how he, even though, you know, he's not a good king, Rehoboam went and was anointed king at Shechem. And so, you know, it's an interesting parallel. I still think it's more like when the Protestants broke off, they just said anybody has the priesthood, right? It's the priesthood of all believers. And while he's not saying anybody can have the priesthood because he's appointing his own, he's basically saying, yeah, but we don't need that. But that part doesn't matter. So he's going pre-David, but he's also disregarding certain aspects that allow him to still maintain a Yahwistic religion without having to really pay attention to what happened at Sinai. It's almost like he skips Sinai and he's focused on the history that starts, we got to the land and before King David, and here we are. I'll just appoint priests, you know, like, because it doesn't matter as long as I say that they have the Levitical priesthood, because if I'm king, I must have a right to a higher priesthood, right? Like, that seems to make sense. I mean, we're trying to piece together history, but and that's
Yeah.
always hard to come up with a narrative and be right 100%, but there's
Well,
something like that going on.
and Latter-day Scooby, he reminded me too because he mentioned the cherubim in his last comment.
Oh,
So one last thing I just remembered that I wanted to say about the golden calves that Jeroboam makes. Um, Jeroboam spent several years, probably, or at least some time in Egypt, waiting for Solomon to die before coming back up and being the
mhm.
spokesman of the people. Um, in Egypt and just broader ancient Near Eastern uh, iconography, animals like bulls and stuff were very often used as the pedestals or the thrones for the invisible deity. The Ark of the Covenant specifically has two cherubim on it, upon the mercy seat, and is meant to be carried around as the royal procession of the God Yahweh, who stands or sits upon the throne upon the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. Um, the very structure of the Ark of the Covenant is fashioned after the Egyptian barks, the processional thrones. Um, Jeroboam, having lived some time in Egypt and coming back up to Israel, will be familiar with a lot of this, I think. He'll be familiar with the way that they do things with their kings and pharaohs and how they institute priesthood and priests. He'll be familiar with how they use iconography and how they use processional thrones and you know what I think the lay reader might read as idols in the two calves. I think he's actually making something more akin to a throne in the shape of a golden calf or bull for Yahweh to sit upon. He doesn't have the Ark of the Covenant. That's in Jerusalem. But he can make thrones for Yahweh to sit upon in Dan and Bethel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thought. I'm welcome to read a little bit more on this and see if I come up with something else. But as far as I can tell, like Mark S. Smith has written a little bit about this, and a few others, and I'm blanking on the reference, but it seems to be that Jeroboam is most likely making his version of the Ark of the Covenant with these two golden calves. They're mercy seats, they're thrones, they're portable thrones for Yahweh to sit on. Anyways, that's my last thought on that. I do want to make mention too, and I'm sorry I'm rambling. I do want to make mention too, throughout the Hebrew Bible, and this is a point I keep bringing up all the time, the names of people and places serve a narrative function. We'll get this in a minute because I think we're about to jump ahead to Elijah.
Yeah.
But the names Rehoboam and Jeroboam. So Rehoboam, Rahav Rahav meaning to increase or widen, and meaning people. His name literally means to increase the people or enlarge the people. Which, depending on how you take that, could be quite ironic given the fact that overnight he loses 75 to 80% of his people.
But remember, his little finger was very big.
Quite big.
Quite big.
But the other thought, so that's Rehoboam's name, Rehavam. Jeroboam, Yaravam, probably comes from the verbal root reeb, which means to contend, and again has the at the end of his name. So most likely his name means something like the people contend. Jeroboam is the spokesperson for the people who contend against Rehoboam and the house of David. These names have literary and narrative function that serve the story. Hebrew readers, native Hebrew readers, these ancient Israelites retelling their history will know immediately when they mention the names Rehavam and Yaravam. They'll know exactly what the story is about just by the names of the people.
I think I mentioned this in one of our chats where it's like the astronaut shooting the other astronaut meme, where it's like, wait, the Old Testament, it's all mythopoetic narrative.
Always has been.
Yeah.
Yes, phenomenal meme.
Yeah.
But guys,
by the way, they knew the name of Jesus. They knew Yeshua / Joshua was going to be his name. FYI. Just to throw that one in there too. Look for it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Yeah. So I think we've said pretty much all we can on chapter 12. I got a little bit longer. And then I'm gonna hop off to join my family for some dinner.
Yeah.
But I think we got enough time to talk about Elijah.
Sure.
At least maybe 17 and 18.
That's what I got, man. I
got
some good stuff here. Let me share my screen for a minute of this. So at the beginning, when we opened up, I was saying, along with Jacob, we both had substituted today. We're not normally our gospel doctrine teachers in our wards. Nope. And so these are my notes. And just like the really short, quick fun of it is, these are my ultimate points, right? So in 17, the widow's story highlights covenant blessings through faith, sacrifice, obedience, reliance on the Lord's sustaining power. And then in 18 is the battle of Mount Carmel demonstrates exclusive loyalty to the true God, cleansing from idolatry and his ultimate power. And together they point to a temple progression. And so that's why I have a Solomon's temple here thing. Entering covenants, being sustained, overcoming through prayer, the joy of resurrection and unity with God, participation with him through his divine power, sanctifies and judges. And that the accounts encourage us to choose covenant loyalty to our Savior, Jesus Christ, that we may also triumph over all opposition. And what I was using with the courtyard really was more associated to chapter 18, but there's some association to 17 as well. The widow of Zarephath is likely not Israelite. She's likely a Gentile. And the foreshadowing is that prior to him going to her, he's being fed by a raven, which is an unclean beast. And so he's being fed because God commanded that a raven feed him. And what are you going to do when you're starving out in the middle of the wilderness? You're going to eat it anyway, right? And you know that God did it because you're Elijah. So he's kind of prepared that that's okay. That like this archetypal preparation happened. And it says that he prepared the widow to receive him at the outset of the chapter. And I don't know what that means. Prepared to receive him. Did she have a messenger come and say, hey, this guy's going to come up and he's going to ask you these things, and you just say yes, or what have you, right? Because what she says her plan is she's going to eat the last little bit that she has with her son and die, which
Right.
means she's probably going to give it to her son, and then they were both just going to die. So he comes and he asks her. Now this is obedience and sacrifice, and in a lot of ways consecration. He basically asks her for the last of what she has and then gives her a divine promise, right? If you do this, well, you'll never not have meal in your vessel and never not have oil in your vessel. It'll be there. It'll continue to fill. The archetypes, he does ask her for water. I think it's important to say that. He asks her for water first, and then he asks her for the meal. Because Christ refers to himself as the living water, the living bread. If you partake of the bread which I give unto you, you shall never hunger again. If you partake of the water that I give unto you, you shall never thirst again. I think there's something when Christ is saying that to the woman in Samaria who's a Samaritan, because what the Assyrians do, you get Samaritans, and that he's up in the area where Elijah's doing this. There's something there that to the woman at the well, it's supposed to click, I think, because of the Elijah story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's very intentional. The New Testament authors are very intentional about making sure that the reader understands Jesus is doing something that's been fulfilled by the prophets of old.
yep, absolutely. So I had the temple up here. I want to point out for later understanding, viewers may know this stuff. You have these vessels. There's 5 on each side, these kind of cistern vessels. They washed the sacrifices before they were burned in these. So they do the bloodletting and all of that, and then they go wash them and then they go burn them. And that matters for chapter 18. Plus, obviously, having the vessel here, which is where the priest would wash, and others would do ritual washings as well. This is for humans to wash in.
Yeah,
This is
the
where they burn every.
Sufyan over there.
What's that?
Yeah, the Sufyan. That's the brazen
Yes.
sea over there for the
Yes.
washings.
Yes. So this is a brazen sea. It's on the back of 12 oxen or bulls, I suppose. I always thought it was meant to be oxen, but if
Yeah,
bull is
it's kind of interchangeable. It's a beast
yeah.
of the field.
Powerful beast of the field. I like it. The
But
one
yeah,
that plows everything, that helps you bring life, that does all the hard work, that gives more life. Yeah. Um, anyway, and then as you move inside, you got the holy place and the Holy of Holies, and the items that are in there. We're not going to have to touch much on these so much, but just so people are aware. And this is where you would come. I think if you were bringing a sacrifice, you would come through here. If you were Gentile or the courtyard of the women was over here or something like that, just to point out a different gate. So you have these, and then because I did this as a handout, so everyone kind of got an idea. I was surprised a little bit how many people hadn't ever actually seen an image of the Temple of Solomon,
oh,
and I was
interesting.
teaching gospel doctrine. I was like, oh, well, I'm glad that you got one and an explanation for everything. Keeping all the references in there, hopefully to help people really be able to go and read it. I don't know, probably most of those got thrown away. However, my notes, again, these are my notes. I read it almost like I'm giving a talk in a way, which is weird, and I didn't even look at my sheets today. But the way I would teach the widow's story is that it helps to illustrate temple covenants for like your average kind of person. Because the average kind of person might be a Gentile in a way, might be a little lost, might be have some sins in their life or what have you, but still is striving to do good because, I mean, that seems to be what she's doing. And she's dealing with suffering that's unjust and the problems of evil in the world. And how does God help people overcome such things? Especially it being a widow, the widows and the orphans, right? Those are like the constant images of the downtrodden and the most oppressed in scripture. And so, as far as we have it, the first thing Elijah does again is he asks her to obey, to sacrifice, and to consecrate unto him so that she may receive greater blessings in return. And she does it. Which is pretty crazy for a lot of people. We have to step back and think, why would she do that? Now, it does say that she was prepared, but I submitted to class. Do we think she did it because she was like, well, if I'm going to die anyway, I may as well feed this guy and he could go on his way and then me and my son can die? Or did she have some other preparation, some other thing in mind? Was she willing to trust that he's a man of God, a prophet, someone who can actually give this promise and God would fulfill it? Um, I don't know. It could be any of those. But she does. She does as told. And there's a video. It's like one of for me, it's an old seminary video because I saw it in seminary. I'm not sure it's a seminary video, but it's a video from the church and it shows Elijah and the woman. It's like 10 minutes long. Find it in the media library by typing in Elijah. And, it's beautiful because the actress they got, she did a great job. She has great facial expressions. She reaches in, after she's fed Elijah, she reaches in, not expecting anything inside the big jar, and she gets a handful. And you see her face kind of go, what? She pulls it out and she looks. She almost can't believe what's in her hand. And she kind of smiles and is almost like a little, what? And she starts playing with it in her hand and it's meal, whatever that is, wheat, corn meal, whatever, right? And she just smiles and kind of starts crying, gets emotional, and Elijah's there like, yeah, I told you. And it's just a great scene. I loved that scene. I was like, wow, they did a good job. I wish I paid attention more in seminary. But just like, what would you do in that situation? Because the beauty of the scene as it was depicted in the video, I think is really well done because she doesn't know what to expect, but she reaches her hand in anyway. So she had to have some faith. She didn't just toss the jar aside like, now what you said is BS and make him reach in to show her. She reached in her hand after she finished making him the cake and handing it to him. She reached in her hand. She showed some faith in that moment and it was rewarded. And obviously we assume the same for the oil and all of that. And he makes this promise to her that her and her son won't die. And I mean, that talks about how he lives with her for 40 days or whatever, probably symbolic number. We don't know how long, in an upper chamber of her house. But then the promise seems broken because she doesn't die, but her son does. And it seems like the sudden illness just comes and takes him real quick. And she starts to go, did God basically do that in order to ultimately punish me for my sins? Because as a parent, you can't imagine, I think, the death of your child and the pain. I know a lot of people have to deal with it. It's unjust. It's suffering that comes by evil that isn't your fault, that isn't their fault, right? So much of the time. And Elijah's like, oh gosh, okay. And it seems like I don't know if he's frustrated or upset or what, because he questions, he's like, why would you do this to the boy? And then he takes the body and he goes upstairs to his room. So he ascends with the body in a way up to the more sacred space that he lives in as this representative of God, lays the body out on his bed. And the part I love is the part where he lays across him, praying over him, saying 3 times, "Oh Lord, my God, I pray thee."
Yeah.
And I love it because obviously, and this is teaching adults and all the adults in the room, I know and everything. I knew from a word, been here forever. And it's like, where else, no one has to answer it literally, but where else are you praying 3 times over the sick and the afflicted? With a call that the Lord will hear your words, right? And so I wanted to point that out. There's so much of the temple in these texts. And, you know, that's not on accident. The scribes, whoever wrote this stuff, meant that. That's what
Yeah.
they intended to do with it. And if anyone wants to be like super critical and be like, well, obviously then it can't be true. They're just trying to paint the narrative of their religion, blah, blah, blah. I believe in miracles because I've seen them. So I don't care what you got to say. I haven't seen someone raised from the dead, but I have seen people literally be healed from stage 4 cancer, and there's no answer multiple times in my life. I've seen other things, healings and such, things that shouldn't happen. I have a good friend. I wasn't there, I didn't see it, but I do know his brother. He called his brother back from the dead after a serious car accident, and his brother's alive now. And so I know these things are true. I know they happen. I've met people to whom they've happened in somewhat similar style. And so I'm not going to walk away and be like, oh, well, blah, blah. They add it in likely because it did happen that way, because it is an ordinance, because it is priesthood power. And this is showing us that Elijah has that authority. This is how they're establishing to the reader that Elijah is who he says he is. And he's using these things that we have been given in a proper way to bless others, because that's what priesthood does. That's chapter 17. Do you have any thoughts, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few things I want to point out from the text.
Yeah, let's do it.
So and maybe this, just for context, we start back at 16. So we've gone through, we had back in chapter 12 and 13, Jeroboam was king. We go through several different kings after him. And unlike the southern kingdom in Judah, where the kings stay within the house of David, the northern kingdom, their kings seem to be coming from all over the place, fighting each other, killing each other, trying to usurp the throne from one another. It doesn't seem to stay in any one family for too long. So we go through, I don't know if this is something like maybe 70 years later after Jeroboam, something like that. We now have Ahab is king in Israel. And he marries a woman named Jezebel, who is a Sidonian. And again, if I were to bring up the map, I don't know if this is maybe the best map for it. Let me see. I want a nice map that you can actually see things on, but it has what I want. Let's see. Oh, let me try this one. Try this one on for size. Okay. Can you see this little map here?
Yes.
All right.
I'm going to try to click it to see if it'll go bigger on the page. I don't know.
Yeah, there we go. That's
way
better. Okay. So this is Israel, Judah. To the side here is Philistia. So Sidon is like right up here where my cursor is. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
My little cursor arrow.
Oh, it's up top. Oh, my cursor's there. I need to move that on the screen. Yes, up there. Got it.
So right up here above the blue, near the on the left side, this is the Mediterranean Sea. So if you look above the blue up along the coast by the Mediterranean Sea where my cursor is, this is about where Samaria would be, or not Samaria, Sidon. This is all Syria up over here. So here's Sidon, where the woman is, the widow in chapter 17. She is right under Sidon here in Zarephath. I'll get back to her in a minute because I think there's some cool things in the text about her and Elijah. Anyways, Jezebel is not Israelite.
Right.
She is Phoenician. She comes from Sidon. She's Sidonian. Um, this whole area here, the blue where the kingdom of Israel is, and really, generally speaking, this whole area, before the Israelites come in, this is all occupied by Philistines, Phoenicians. These are Edomites, Moabites. These are a number of different Canaanite or otherwise pagan nations. This whole area. So when Israel comes up out of Egypt with Moses and later Joshua, and they finally come in and claim these lands for themselves and establish Israel as a place, not just a people, they got to kick out a whole lot of Canaanites to do that. Well, particularly this region in the north, the northern hill country where the blue is, where the kingdom of Israel currently is in our reading, and north of it, this is all Baal territory. This whole area in the years prior, and even during the time of Israel, this is all Baal territory. The people worship Baal, they worship Asherah or Atharoth, they worship a number of other deities. The Moabites worship Chemosh. The Ammonites worship another god, Milcham. Um, there's all these region around here in the north that are people, Canaanites, worshiping other deities. And the predominant warrior deity who's like the man, he's the deity of this region in the northern hill country, is Baal. Jezebel brings Baal worship with her when she marries into Ahab and into Israelite kingdom. So we have in the text in chapter 16, we set the stage to bring Elijah in with Jezebel and Ahab establishing Baal worship. They're setting up high places, Bamot, and other worship sites around Israel to worship Baal and Atharoth or Asherah and Astarte, other deities that are common deities in the Northern Hill Country, and certainly would have been common to Jezebel and her people. Ahab has no problem with this. He's like, sure, go ahead, whatever. He doesn't seem to put up any fight about it. He just kind of rolls over and says, yeah, why not?
She must have been really beautiful or something. I don't know.
She must have been a looker. I don't know. But in any case, he doesn't seem to put up a fight. He has no qualms with any of this, goes right along with it. And so they start worshiping Baal and a number of other deities around Israel. Baal, and I asked my classes too, and this is only really something you know when you have these kinds of conversations and when you go and read articles and papers and books about the history of Israel and the ancient Near East. If you're not doing that, a lot of this doesn't compute. It's not immediately apparent from the text what's going on. So I asked the class today, what did I say? I said, why are they worshiping Baal? Why is Jezebel bringing Baal's worship into northern Israel? And I got a lot of silence, but I got a few answers from people. Good answers, some thoughtful answers. And none of them really hit on who Baal was, why Baal of all deities. And I think we just don't really know that much about him. The lay membership of the church, we don't talk about Baal except for in these chapters when he's addressed. And if you're not reading scholarship and stuff, you don't know. he's just another god from another Canaanite nation.
Mhm.
Um,
Just one of these
and
other false gods, like, who cares, right?
right. So the point I was making was, who is Baal? Crickets. So we kind of went over some of this in class today. I took a 2-minute sort of detour to explain this a little bit. Um, as I mentioned a second ago, Baal was the god that was worshipped in this territory. There are a number of different deities in the Ugaritic and Canaanite pantheon that were worshipped prior to Israel and all throughout Israel's history in the Northern Hill Country, and around Israel. But Baal, for all intents and purposes, kind of became the main king of the gods who was worshipped uh, predominantly. Baal was a young, healthy warrior storm god. That was his characteristics, his profile. In the Ugaritic literature, in the Baal cycle, and in polemic texts and tales about Baal from the Israelites, some of which is contained in our scriptures in the Old Testament. Baal rides on the clouds of heaven with lightning and a sword or a spear. He defeats Leviathan. He defeats Yam and Mot, the god of sea and death. He does all these grand things, and then, as part of his conquest over the other gods, rises to become king of the gods, um, and basically requests from El, the father god, Elu, to make his temple throne, his palace, on Mount Saphon, which is in the north in Samaria, to make that the center place for the divine council. That the divine council of El will now meet at my palace on Mount Saphon in Samaria. He comes to prominence in the Ugaritic literature.
And here I thought it was about Olympus, and I'm
Well, that's Zeus.
that's it.
Um, well, but a similar theme, right?
Yep. Yep.
These gods that fight and conquer each other
Mhm.
set up their mountain palaces as the center for all worship and obeisance to the gods, right?
Mhm.
Um, so Baal is this storm god who controls the weather. He comes riding on the clouds with lightning and storm. Um, so prior to the worship of Yahweh in this region by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and later the Israelite people under Moses and Joshua, this was all Canaanite territory. Baal was very much Baal, Marduk, all these other gods of that region were worshipped prior to Yahweh being worshipped in this region. Yahweh was brought up south, up into the north with the Israelites. The Israelites had their covenant with Yahweh and worshiped Yahweh, and they brought Yahweh with them up to the land of Israel, which Yahweh promised to them with his promise to Abraham. But prior to that happening, this was all Baal's territory.
Yeah.
So Baal controlled the agriculture. He controlled the rain. So he controlled how well your crops grew. What's the very first thing that Elijah does in chapter 17 when we're introduced to him?
He neuters Baal by closing the heavens from rain.
That's right. He's like, you guys have brought Baal worship back down to the hill country in Israel because Ahab, you've married Jezebel, and you're no longer following Yahweh. You're no longer retaining and maintaining your covenant loyalty to Yahweh. So guess what? I'm going to turn off the rain. Yahweh is going to turn off the rain. And he does that for what, 3 years?
3 years before the battle at
Before,
Mount Carmel. Yeah.
Right. So the first thing that we know about Elijah is he comes in onto the scene and says, yeah, Yahweh's going to turn off the rain because you guys have started following a rain storm god. So I'm going to neuter your god. So if I go back to the text for a minute, share my screen. All right. Okay. So Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, let me move my face out of the way. As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. So he's talking to Ahab, the king. The word of the Lord came to him, saying, go from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the Wadi Karith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the Wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So this is not a totally uncommon thing. You mentioned that the ravens are an unclean animal, which is interesting. The very idea of a prophet being out in the wilderness and being fed by the animals is not uncommon to ancient Near Eastern mythology and lore and scripture from these various nations. Snow White got it from somewhere. She didn't invent this, right? So this is very, very old sort of motif. The prophet of the Lord or the prophet of the gods is being fed by the animals in the wilderness as he's going about his duties. But in any case, he's living out in the wilderness by the Jordan, presumably because Ahab wants to kill him. And then we get to the widow. And you mentioned this before when you first started talking about it a few minutes ago. I want to bring it up again. If I were to bring up the map, I mentioned where Sidon was, and right underneath Sidon is Zarephath. Zarephath. This is outside of Israel's territory. I am almost positive that the widow of Zarephath is not Israelite.
Yeah.
She's living outside of Israel's territory. She's Phoenician. She even says, so
as your God liveth, or something like that. As your God lives. Yeah.
As your God lives, as the Lord. And by the way, in Hebrew, this would just be as Yahweh, your
As
God
Yahweh
lives.
That's what I was referencing earlier. I was going to bring that up when I said that they knew his name was Yeshua. When you see Lord like that, just a hint for anyone that catches this. When you see Lord like that in all caps, what the translators did is they took Yahweh and made it Lord instead.
Go on. Adonai.
And with the names, yeah.
So the name Lord here, the Hebrew is actually the name Yahweh. So she's saying to Elijah, as Yahweh your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple sticks that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat and die. Elijah, as we mentioned a minute ago, the first thing he does is ask her to bring water first. And then when she decides to bring him some water, then he asks for a morsel of bread. So something interesting here. She knows who Elijah is because he's an Israelite. She knows where he's coming from. It's not entirely clear in the text if she knew this was Elijah the prophet who stopped the rain.
Right.
But by the way, this whole region is affected by the drought, not just the northern kingdom of Israel. The whole region is affected by the drought. This woman is not an Israelite, has no bones to pick with Ahab and Jezebel. She's Phoenician. And yet she's affected by the very drought caused by the man who is asking her to feed her the last bit of meal and water she has before she dies. How difficult must that have been? This is the man responsible for my son and I starving to death.
Yeah. If she knew, right? Yeah.
If she knew, she knows he's an
Which
Israelite.
the reason why she might have known is Ahab later is like, you're the guy vexing us.
Right.
Anyway.
But she at least knows he's an Israelite. He's coming up out of Israel, and she knows Yahweh is your God. And I will swear by the name of your God, Yahweh, that I don't have anything baked, only a handful of meal in a jar.
Yep.
That puts an extra little sting on this scenario. Knowing that she's dying, her son is dying because of a drought caused by this very person who's asking her for her last food.
Or, I mean, technically caused by Ahab and Jezebel, but people.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But for all intents and purposes, she has no skin in the game. She's not an Israelite.
Yeah.
So she would just say, this is all Yahweh and Elijah, and this is your guys' deal.
Yeah.
Why am I dying for your deal? So in any case, I wanted to bring that up because I feel like it adds an extra layer of not just context, but it adds an extra layer of sort of urgency to this tale. And the question could be asked of all of us. Would we be willing to do the same if we were in her shoes? And that's a question I'm not comfortable answering on a whim.
That is difficult.
Yeah. But it is something that I think at some point we'll all have to kind of ask ourselves if we're not confronted with it directly in our lives. Are we willing to sacrifice to the utmost for the greater good and right. for our loyalties? But good comes out of it. We don't have to go through the whole story. Right. I think you gave a really good summary earlier. By Elijah. So ultimately, this was a blessing. And in 18, after many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year of the drought. Oof. Saying, go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. We've already neutered Baal with the drought.
And they haven't changed.
For 3 years.
The guy. Yeah.
They haven't changed. They're still worshiping him. I wonder if they're thinking if we just worship him harder, eventually he'll be able to turn on. Yeah, I'm gonna start dating her harder.
Yep.
I don't know what the thinking is there, but Jezebel during this time, they have amassed 450 plus priests of Baal in Israel, and they are actively killing the prophets and priests of Yahweh in Israel. So much so that Obadiah, a servant in Israel, starts hiding away the remaining prophets and priests of Yahweh in caves. And he takes 100 prophets, hides them 50 to a cave, and provides them with bread and water. If he's found out, not only are they dead, but he's dead. But he is loyal to the Lord. Obadiah, the name Obadiah, again, I said earlier, names. All the names, right? Obadiah means servant of Yahweh. Elijah, Eliyahu, means my God is Yahweh. How fitting. What a coincidence that is. sorry. So the Lord tells Elijah, go back to Ahab. I'm going to end this drought. I'll send rain on the earth. So go back to Ahab and present yourself to him. He meets with Obadiah as Ahab and Obadiah are roaming about the country. He meets Obadiah on the road. They have an exchange, and Elijah says, "Go back to Ahab and tell him I'm going to meet with him." And now we have Elijah presenting himself to Ahab and the people. Let's see. This is yeah. So verse 17. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel? Oh, you troublemaker."
Oh,
Um,
that Elijah.
and I get the sense from it, and I've been reading the Hebrew on it a little bit. Um, I get the sense that the English kind of neuters it a little bit. You troubler of Israel. I feel like the earlier interpretation of this is probably like you a-hole. Like
Yeah, something.
like dude, you suck. You are the one who ruined all of this for us, you jerk.
Yep.
It's probably stronger words than oh, you troubler or you
Right.
troublemaker.
Well, this is what
Um,
happens when you have like a word created into a noun and you're like, how do I do this? Anyway.
yeah. And I don't know that for sure, but I get the sense that there's probably some stronger connotation to the language being
Oh
used
yeah.
here than what the English presents.
Yeah.
And he
Agreed.
answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now, therefore, have all Israel assemble for me at Mount Carmel, uh, with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So they're going to set up this contest. I don't know that we need to go through and read all of this.
No, I mean, I still got
Um,
a summary page if you want me to pull that up.
well, I think we can summarize it.
Yeah.
So um, we have the contest is who it's not to decide who do the people choose. Are you going to worship Baal or are you going to worship Yahweh? That's secondary. The actual contest is who is the real God in Israel?
Hmm.
Is it Baal or is it Yahweh?
Now, we got to remember having other gods isn't necessarily wrong in the mind of Elijah because we're still in a period. This is before Judah's gone into exile and come back, and everyone says that's when they became monotheistic. If you still buy that or not, but it's
I
like,
don't, but yeah.
yeah, I know, neither do I. But even if you do buy that, this is still before that period. I actually had to have this conversation in my class because people thought that Israel was monotheistic. They're like, well, yeah, like these are all false gods and stuff. I'm like, false in what way? You know, so we had to discuss it. Like Elijah obviously didn't worship these other gods and thought they were evil and wrong, but he's never like actually believing it doesn't say that they don't exist. He's mocking them by like, did he go to the bathroom? Is he on a
Right.
vacation? Is he still asleep? Which, if you understand the reason why he does those mocks, or at least for one of them we know, in the Baal cycle, El would have to cut himself to wake up Baal, who then Baal would bring the rain and revivify the world, you know. He would theopneustos the world by giving it rain, by the way. For anyone that's nerdy enough to understand why I said that, go read Peter again. Um, but or Paul again, I mean, but you have El cutting himself. What do the priests do? They cut themselves to try to wake him up. And then he goes, oh, well, he is obviously still asleep, you know?
Yeah.
And then they dance. Oh, well, he must be on a trip. And then who knows what else they do? And he's like, maybe he's on the toilet,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so The other little thing that Elijah does that mocks them a little bit is um after they've been praying to Baal, crying to Baal, dancing, cutting themselves, making a big show and dance of it, with no response. It's finally Elijah's turn. And what does he do? And this is something that I caught the second time around when I was reading this week. Um, when he makes the altar, he specifically uses 12 stones
Mm-hmm.
For the 12 tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem they're having is in the northern kingdom with Ahab and Jezebel. It's not with the southern kingdom right now. Their problem is specifically with the northern kingdom. But under the covenant of Yahweh, all 12 tribes from both kingdoms are meant to be united. So what does that say about our loyalty?
The way I taught it today also is, this will help answer it, I think, is the Lord intended for all of them to still worship in the temple. And so much of what Elijah does is a temple pattern. He builds an altar, it's the right kind of animal, he names it Israel.
Yeah.
He probably cut it in an appropriate way, not breaking any bones and things like that. Probably in the way of a sin sacrifice, which is appropriate for the kind of animal as well. Um, I mean, he does burn the whole animal, appropriate for a sin sacrifice. Um, and even the water, it's 12 jars of water, poured over 3 times. Again, I almost think like the number 3, it's coming back, like it's almost like he's praying over it 3 times. But he also creates a water feature where you have the water there. And yes, the water gets all licked up, but he's creating a temple-like scene where because if we go back, I had that picture up earlier of the temple and had those 5 cisterns on each side. And
Yeah.
it's called out that they washed before they would finally burn the sacrifice. He's washing the sacrifice. It's been 50 to however many years, you said, right? At least a whole generation has passed. I told my class, I said, we're at least 2 generations down. There's more that have been born probably, right? But we're at least 2 generations down.
Yeah.
How much do they remember of the temple and know? I don't know, but they're neighbors. I mean, it's not Jerusalem. Yeah, it's not like they got cars, but it's not that far. Um, they have interactions, I'm sure. So they probably do know some of these things. But he's creating like a mini temple scene. He's kind of condensed it down into what he can there with an altar for a burnt sacrifice that's of all the right kinds, with the water, he's building these themes. And when you bring the fire down, you burn the sacrifice, but there's the joint theme of baptism by water, baptism by fire, which was always meant to
Right.
be something, in my opinion, about the temple in understanding the sacrifices. But there's a lot of depth that he brings to it, related back to the temple, including that all 12 tribes are supposed to be united. I mean, the bullock is called Israel. Like, come on. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say the 12, uh, you know, they fill the trench with water, and they have 4 jars with water that they fill 3 times, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a time of drought where Baal is supposed to be able to control the rain and the water. And
There's
so
also that.
this
Yes.
isn't
Okay.
this is
Yeah.
an extra layer of mockery
It
that
could be.
I'm going to take the last little bit of remaining water that we have available to us, and I'm going to use it for my altar to Yahweh for the tribes of Israel. Um, and so, anyways, we know what happens. He calls upon the Lord. O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you, O Lord, you, Yahweh, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and even licked up the water that was in the trench. Everything is consumed. Um, so there's no denying whatsoever. You can't weasel your way out of this. Yahweh produced the miracle and burned up the offering and the altar. Yahweh is God of Israel. So this is, to me, that this is the end of the contest here is really the end of sort of the little mini Baal cycle in Kings.
Yeah,
It's not the last time we'll see Baal come up.
of course.
He comes back even in the New Testament.
Yep.
This problem doesn't necessarily go away, but this is the sign to all of Israel: Yahweh is God in Israel, not Baal. Baal is an interloper. He doesn't belong here. He is a god of the foreign nations. He has no jurisdiction and power here. This is Yahweh's people and Yahweh's territory.
Yep.
And so, of course, what does Elijah do in connection with their laws, some of what we read in Deuteronomy, for example? Well,
Kill him.
if a prophet comes prophesying in the name of a god other than Yahweh, and you are an Israelite, you're supposed to cast them out or kill them, get them out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So he seizes the prophets of Baal. He says to the people, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon and killed them there. All 450 of them.
Now, I got a small quiz for you. What is the root word for Kishon?
I would have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head.
So I looked it up, but I don't know how to read yet. I need to take your series a little more seriously. But so the root for Kishon is related to the word to snare, which is also the word judgment is associated to the same root. So we have, I'm going to bring this together. Kishon is in the Jezreel Valley down at the bottom of the Mount Carmel. And it's the Jezreel Valley where Deborah was as the chief judge when she brought her small army out, and the chariots of Sisera, whatever his name was, came. And it's in a valley, so the chariots expect to win. But what does God do? Floods it out, washes them away. It's a place of ensnarement or of judgment by God upon Israel's enemies. What is going to, in some future time, happen in the Jezreel Valley?
Sorry, I was looking up the root.
So now you know. Armageddon. Armageddon is going to happen. The armies are going to gather in the Jezreel Valley. And guess what? The Lord's going to come down, touch them out, split it, consume them with fire. You got water baptism, you got fire baptism. You have this symbolism that keeps repeating itself. And so
Yeah.
you have the beginning of that is Deborah, the enemies are washed out with water. Judgment is made. Judgment is made here in the same valley at the same, it's a brook or river, whatever. Kishon, the Wadi. And it's this theme around Kishon. I don't think we see it a lot in scriptures. Again, because mostly we come centered down near Jerusalem for most of the rest of scripture, but it's a place of judgment where God executes judgment upon the enemies of his people. It's kind of fascinating. And that it's in between these areas of Shechem and Penuel and Dan and wherever else, right? Like that's all an area.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Again, I don't know how to read it, but I looked up all that and I made sure it was right.
Yeah, Kishon. So the root is Kofbav Shin, which means like curved, winding, or could denote setting a trap or snare.
Yeah.
And the suffix on, as we see with other names like Jershon, Yaroshon, denotes a place.
Yep.
So yeah, it's the place of winding or the place of a snare or a trap.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yep. So yeah, that's basically 18, right? So we get to the end of 18. And now we have rain. The Lord turns the rain on.
And Ahab should convert. He should.
But he doesn't.
What just happened?
I know, but he doesn't.
But he doesn't. That Jezebel, man. telling you.
Well, Ahab rode off to Jezreel. Um, and this is kind of interesting. The hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran in front of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
So some commentaries that I looked at basically said like this is basically just showing how Elijah basically had superpowers. The hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he was able to get there
Outrun horses.
he was
Yeah.
able to get there faster than Ahab. Um, so it's kind of like a way of saying that if you're a true prophet to the God, the deity will imbue you with special human powers.
Sweet.
Which is I you know
I believe
pretty
it.
pretty sweet, but
Pretty sweet.
yeah, I don't. So this is the last thing I think we'll talk about because I think I gotta go.
Yeah.
Um, Ahab doesn't convert. He's not convinced, uh, despite what he just witnessed, and despite the fact that the 450 prophets of Baal were just murdered.
Yeah.
Well, not murdered, but
I mean, killed
killed.
for not legitimate
Um,
reasons. Yeah.
but he doesn't convert. The people seem to convert. At least 7,000 men uh, are basically now at the command of Elijah. And yet, uh, Elijah's story is not done. We learn a little bit more about him. I think this is one of the last things I'll point out. Um, Chapter 19 here. This is where we get the story of Elijah fleeing to the wilderness,
To the cave.
uh, to the cave, and where we get the spirit of the Lord comes to him as a still small voice, right?
Mhm.
Uh, this is interesting, and I don't really know what to say about it, or I don't really have any real good notes about it. But I thought this was interesting. Um, so much hardship had passed over the last 3 years with the drought and everything that's happened. Uh, the people finally get to see and witness for themselves the power of Yahweh in Israel, and have the opportunity to turn more fully back to Yahweh. A lot don't, for whatever reason. Um,
Because worshiping Baal and Asherah in those groves is quite a time, man.
well,
If
it
people
must
know what
it
I mean.
must be.
Yeah. People know what I mean.
Um, Despite the big win that Elijah just had, um, he ends up finding himself back on the run into the wilderness. Um, and in verse 4, he goes into the wilderness. He sits under a broom tree, and he's literally talking to God and asking to die.
Yep.
He's just like, I'm done. I can't anymore with these people. I can't do this anymore. Just let me go.
Jonah does it. Moses does it. Elijah does it.
Um, the only thing I could say here that makes any sense to me is um you could do all the right things. You could be loyal to the Lord, loyal to your family, uh be an upstanding citizen, honest, hardworking, faithful. You can be all these things. You will still struggle. And there may be times where that struggle is so overwhelming that you just want to be done. Um,
Especially when you know, like, it ain't the end and there's something glorious. It's not like he's going, well, let me go to hell, you
yeah,
know?
but the good news here, especially with Elijah and his story, is the sun hasn't set. The day's not over. There's more to do, and he will see yet more blessings in Israel through his faithful service. Um, So if there's anything I can get from this little, you know, speed bump in Elijah's life, and like you said, Moses experiences this, Jonah experiences this. This is not unique to Elijah here. You could be doing everything right, and you'll be so overwhelmed by things going on around you, and feeling like you're a failure. Your labors added up to nothing. It's not nothing. It's not meaningless. Your efforts mattered, and we see time and again, as long as you're willing to answer the call, the Lord will provide opportunities for you to serve, and blessings will come, even if it's not right now. But don't give up. I think that's the message of Elijah.
At least here, for sure. Well, and
Yeah.
with the widow too, it's like it almost bookends in a way when you
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah. I found that interesting. Um, it starts with the widow and him basically saying, "Don't give up. This isn't the end." And now we have here towards the end of his story, "Don't give up, Elijah. It's not the end."
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I thought there was something interesting and powerful about that, and I don't think I have the words to really truly describe how I feel about that. Um, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring it up.
It's good.
But yeah,
Pretty good.
um, I think we'll go ahead and stop there for tonight. It's been a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours almost.
Yeah. Ish. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's our live stream, everybody. Thanks for those who hung out. Latter Day Scooby, and those of you in the chat, I'm glad you could join us. This is going to be up on the channel for the public. So if you're coming into this now at the end of the live, it'll be up for you. You can just start over, or you can watch it from the beginning. It'll be available to you. Yeah, I'm gonna have another video out this week. One that I've been working on. Well, started working on a couple weeks ago because then we went on vacation, then I got sick.
Ah,
But I do have a video that I'll be making this week that should be out in the next several days, later this week. And maybe I'll do another live stream for the channel members this next weekend. I have some more Hebrew basics to talk about on the channel, and that's going to be strictly for channel members. And for those of you who are channel members, if you have specific topics or subjects or things you want me to react to, we have whatever it is, let me know in the comments. It doesn't matter what video, this video, a different video. Let me know what you want to see. And I'll put together some more things that are just for channel members, because I want to give back to you guys and thank you for all of your support. And with that, I think I'm out. I'll see you later,
all
Michael.
right. All right, man. Thank you. We'll see you.
Have a good one.
You too.